You've heard the phrase a million times, right? Standing on the shoulders of giants. It's kind of the go-to saying for how progress happens, We build on the amazing work of the people who came before us. But what if the real story behind that famous phrase is way more fascinating and, frankly, a lot more complicated than you've been led to believe?
So, our story almost always kicks off right here. The year is 1675, and Sir Isaac Newton drops this legendary line in a letter. It's held up as this perfect moment of humility from, one of the greatest scientific minds ever. He's basically saying, hey, my discoveries, they were only possible because of the folks who paved the way. It's the perfect little bow on the concept of scientific progress.
But hang on a second. This is where the story takes a turn. What if I told you that Newton didn't even come up with that phrase? Not even close. And that its original meaning was actually something quite different.
Yeah, to find the real source of this idea, we've got to jump in a time machine. We're leaving Newton and the scientific revolution behind and heading way, way back, deep into the Middle Ages. Turns out the secret isn't with a physicist, but with a French philosopher from the 12th century. Okay, so check this out. Newton writes his letter in 1675. But more than 500 years before that, in 1159, a scholar named John of Salisbury jots down this exact same metaphor, and he gives the credit to his teacher, Bernard of Chartres, who was saying it all the way back around 1130. That's right, this modern idea is over half a millennium older than Newton.
And here's the original Latin phrase, nanos gigantum humoris incidentes. It translates to dwarves standing on the shoulders of giants. Bernard used this to explain how scholars of his day should think about the ancient Greek and Roman thinkers. The idea was pretty simple. We are the dwarfs. They are the giants.
But for Bernard, this wasn't really about surpassing the giants. It was a teaching tool. He was telling his students, look, we can see farther, but not because we're smarter or have better eyesight. It's simply because we are being lifted up by the incredible stature of these ancient thinkers. It was all about respect, about studying the past, and building on a foundation you truly revere.
And you can actually see this idea brought to life. If you ever go to the famous Chartres Cathedral in France, which was built not long after Bernard's time, look at the stained glass windows. You'll see the four gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as these smaller figures literally sitting on the shoulders of the giant Old Testament prophets. The message is religious for sure, but the principle is identical. The new sees further because it's built on the foundation of the old.
Okay, so let's zoom back to Newton. If this phrase has a 500-year history of being about humility, why is there even a debate about what he meant? Well, this is where a philosophical idea gets tangled up in a very human story of jealousy, rivalry, and maybe, just maybe, a really epic insult.
You see, the person Newton sent that letter to was a man named Robert Hooke. And you have to understand, Newton and Hooke were not friends. They were bitter rivals. They fought publicly over who deserved credit for some of the biggest discoveries of their time. Their relationship was, let's just say, extremely tense.
So, historians have two completely different takes on this. On one hand, maybe it was a genuine olive branch, a humble nod to Hooke and others. But, on the other hand, some argue it was one of the most savage, sarcastic insults in scientific history. Why? Well, Robert Hooke was known to be a man of very small stature, with a hunched back. So was Newton saying he was standing on the shoulder of a giant, while subtly calling his short, hunched-over rival a dwarf? We'll probably never know for sure, but wow, it adds a whole new layer to the story, doesn't it?
Whether it was a genuine compliment or a legendary burn, Newton's use of the phrase is what launched it into stardom. It transformed from a medieval teaching tool into this powerful way for us to understand progress in the modern world. And today, this idea is absolutely everywhere. In law, it's at the heart of patent theory. How do you reward the original giant while also letting new innovators build on their work? In school, if you've ever written a research paper, your literature review is basically you mapping out which giant's shoulders you're standing on. And in tech, it's the entire foundation of open source software.
Think about it. Modern software is built in layers. Programmers almost never start from absolute scratch. They use existing code, existing libraries, existing frameworks that thousands of people built before them. It's like this massive genealogy tree of code, with every new piece of software standing on the work that came before.
Just how important is this? Well, here's a number for you. 100%. That's how many of the world's top 500 supercomputers run on Linux, an open-source operating system. Let that sink in. Every single one of the most powerful computers on our planet is powered by a system built collaboratively over decades by a community. It's just a mind-blowing example of this principle in action.
In fact, the metaphor is so fundamental to how we think about knowledge now that Google Scholar, the search engine that millions of scientists and researchers use every single day, has it as its official motto. It's baked right into the infrastructure of modern research.
But here's the final twist. As we've gotten deeper into the 21st century, the metaphor itself is starting to get a little shaky. In this age of massive, global, team-based science, are we really just standing on the shoulders of a few lone giants? Or is something else going on entirely?
This quote from a neuroscientist named Tom Donahue just nails the modern critique. He says that if he only credits the big-name giants, he's completely ignoring the hundreds, maybe thousands of other people, his mentors, his peers, the lab techs, whose work was absolutely essential for him to get anything done.
So, if standing on giants doesn't quite fit anymore, what's the alternative? Well, people like Donahue are proposing a new metaphor for our time. Not standing on shoulders, but crowd surfing.
Let's just compare them for a second. The giants metaphor is heroic, right? It's all about these few towering figures. But it can also be, as Donahue calls it, a humble brag. A way of saying, oh, my work is connected to Newton and Einstein. Crowd surfing, though, that paints a totally different picture. It says that modern progress is a massive team sport. It suggests that you're being carried forward by a huge community of people, from your direct mentors to the people who maintain the equipment.
So that's the big question for us today. What does progress actually look like now? Is it still the story of a few lone geniuses changing the world? Or has discovery itself changed, making us all more like crowd surfers, carried along by the collective energy of a huge, interconnected sea of people? How we answer that doesn't just change how we see the past, it changes who gets the credit for the world we're building right now.